Royal mistresses had been tolerated and even expected in the past, but that was in the age of deference, when privacy could always be maintained. At a London dinner party, the Queen's cousin, Princess Alexandra of Kent, raised this topic with Woodrow Wyatt. Wyatt wrote in his diary that Alexandra rather nervously asked me, did I think the monarchy would survive? They are obviously all very rattled. Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jessica Nell, and if you are new, then welcome, and I'd like to earn your subscription today. We are doing Palace Papers. I believe this is episode 7, and it's going to be the last one that we do focused on Camilla. So, Queen Camilla now. But at this point, when we left her last time, she's basically the most hated woman in Britain. Her own marriage is falling apart, and she is clinging more and more to Charles. We're going to get right into the reading. I just want to say at the outset that if you are just joining us for the first time, you need to have a little bit of background information in that. I believe this is our 3rd or 4th episode specifically about Camilla. And so if you come and you feel this great deal of outrage about how Diana was the wronged woman and all of this, just know that we have discussed those things in detail, specifically in the last episode. But we've also seen the progression of Camilla and Charles's relationship before either of them were married. Then once Camilla was married, their relationship basically never stopped. And then once Charles got married, we were told that perhaps it stopped during the breeding years. We even talked about that term. So just know that we have gone through those emotions together. We have talked about the horrors of this kind of aristocratic, adulterous normativeness, and how disgusting we find it, and that you and I don't live that way, that we don't find this acceptable. And I would say it this way: giving Camilla an honest take, and even being willing to say true, positive things about her, does not erase those emotions, those reactions, those moral judgments, those awarenesses of hypocrisy that we all feel when we read this story. So I just want to say that at the outset so that we can all enter into this knowing together, yes, we've said those things, we've felt those things, and whatever we work through and talk about in this episode doesn't invalidate any of that, okay? All that to say, I may yet have some outrage coming. I just want to go on the record that we've already been through these various things before. Okay. In January 1993, 7 months after the publication of Andrew Morton's book, the Camilla Gate tape robbed the two lovers of any cover at all. For the first time, the heir to the throne had nowhere to hide. The incontrovertibility of the evidence busted every layer of upper-class obfuscation, every vestige of the dignity of disavowal. "Game, set, and match," Diana exclaimed triumphantly to her personal protection officer, Ken Wharf, clutching a copy of the Mirror containing the transcript. I just want to say, moments like this need to also simultaneously be informing our perspective of Diana. We need not to hold her as this ethereal, unspoiled princess that never put a foot wrong, ever. And to me, this is a moment of her morally putting a foot wrong. If you are the aggrieved wife, then the things that you would feel in this moment would be grief, sorrow, despair, sadness, humiliation, mortification, anger. Those would all be in the spectrum of healthy, normal. We would all feel those things. But in this, she's seeing it as a game, set, match. She's not seeing it as oh gosh, you know, I could see a perspective where you say, I'm so thankful that the truth is coming to light because people need to know this and they need to understand the lay of the land in order to understand what has happened. I can totally get that perspective, that being for truth, being for reality being known by others, I'm for that. But seeing it as a game, seeing it as he's made his moves, now this is a big one where game, set, match, I'm about to win this round, is just petty. It's cheapening. It makes the whole thing feel more coarse and less in the realm of what's right and wrong. It actually puts her in a position where she's not above reproach in this. That's my thought. Tell me yours. For Camilla, coming 7 months after Morton, it brought mortification times 10. The brutal exposure ended any murmuring mystique around the status of royal mistress and reduced it to something that sounded furtive and squalid and earned the mockery of the world. I'm going to read a portion of this that she notes. It is still available on YouTube. It's all there, but I'll read a portion of it and I will try not to, blush or hide my face in shame. You're awfully good at feeling your way along. Oh, stop. Oh gosh, y'all, this is bad. I want to feel my way along you, all over you, and up and down you, and in and out. Oh, particularly in and out. Oh, that's just what I need at the moment. I'll live inside your trousers or something. It would be much easier. What are you going to turn into, a pair of knickers? Or, God forbid, a Tampax, just my luck. So he really said that. That was really true. Tampax jokes lit up every comedy show. Cartoons featuring Charles talking dirty to his plants. In Italy, they called him Prince Tampacino. Camilla Parker Bowles was now a household name, and she was being hounded by the press. She retreated to Middlewick House and pulled up the drawbridge. She had never felt more isolated. Meeting Charles was now nearly impossible because of all the surveillance, and she feared calling him in case their phones were bugged. In 2017, she described it this way: I couldn't really go anywhere, but the children came and went as normal. They just got on with it, and so did great friends. I would pass the time by reading a lot. I thought, well, if I'm stuck here, I might as well do something positive, like read all the books I want to read and try to learn to paint, though that wasn't a huge success. And after a while, life sort of went on. Life sort of did, but it took Camilla several years to recover her game face. Friends were concerned about her health in particular. One of them told Christopher Wilson, I'm genuinely worried about her. The spark has gone out of her life and she looks haunted and hunted. Unlike Charles, who had castle gatekeepers and protection officers to shield him, Camilla had only her front door. One source of support was her father, Major Shand. I remember once, Camilla recalled, when he was staying with me at Middlewick and the press were outside. Every couple of years, they'd be rattling the door, coming down the chimney, banging on the window. After a while, my father calmly went to the front door and he summoned them all. They came clustering round, thinking there was about to be some great statement about me. And he said, Gentlemen, in our family, we keep our traps shut. Thank you very much. And walked in again. He closed the door with a smile and that was it. I don't think the press could believe what they'd heard, but that was how we were always brought up. Never complain and never explain. Don't whinge, just get on with it. How downcast she really felt can be detected in a telling mirror photograph that appeared in March 1993, which shows her driving up to Middlewick House wearing a drab babushka headscarf and looking despondent. Yeah, I mean, this whole thing, we can all feel, look, you brought this on yourself. Like, you're the one who entered into this from your own marriage a long time ago. And then you had a clean break and you could have made a new set of decisions after he marries Diana. And you didn't. So on the one hand, yes, you brought all of this on yourself. You have done this. And yet there is this way that, like, the person who obtained these recordings waited 4 years to bring them up. And there's already this horrifying blow of the book where she's been publicly scorned. And so she's under the weight of all of that. And then this hits. And you can just imagine, I think any of us, if we take ourselves, whatever anger we might feel or judgmentalism, and we say, when has there been a time in your life when you already felt like you were pushed to the point where you had never been under this much stress before, and then something else hits you? That feeling is awful. And to have to go through it more or less alone, not being able to go into public, it's a very difficult position to be in. The tape laid bare a cynical code of marital morals that was socially discomforting to peers who often had their own arrangements. Yeah, I bet it would if you were an upper class person who had kind of quietly existed in this world and not ever had to bear the scrutiny of what people think when they see that sort of behavior. Yeah, it would put you on display. Camilla and Charles had mortified not just themselves, but an entire class. And I actually think that's a built-in blessing to come out of this scandal. I think, somebody asked in the comments after one of the more recent episodes, Jess, do you think the aristocratic class still operates just like this? And the truth is, I have no idea. So if you British folks who are perhaps adjacent to or have lived in those circles, I would be interested to know. But my answer was that I would imagine that not only this spotlight that happened at this time, but also the advent of social media, my guess would be that that makes all of that kind of sneaking around much more difficult. When there are flash, snapshots going up anywhere and everywhere on Instagram, TikTok videos being made, whatever. I mean, barring just saying, hey, everybody leave your phones at the front. I mean, even then, right after the party, somebody can pick up their phone and start texting about, yeah, did you see so-and-so and so-and-so? Yeah, they spent the whole night in the corner or whatever. So to me, this sort of thing, which we also read about in the Kennedy family. So it's not just the British upper class, it was the upper class in America as well. I don't know how that class continues to operate just like this. Now, at the same time, sexual sin is sexual sin. It's nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun. It has existed, thousands of years ago, and it still exists today. So my guess would be that they find their ways around it. But I do wonder if the advent of social media has made it significantly more difficult to do easily and to do without there being potential scandal. Royal mistresses had been tolerated and even expected in the past, but that was in the age of deference, when privacy could always be maintained. At a London dinner party, the Queen's cousin, Princess Alexandra of Kent, raised this topic with Woodrow Wyatt. Wyatt wrote in his diary that Alexandra rather nervously asked me, did I think the monarchy would survive? They are obviously all very rattled. This idea of, everybody used to get away with it, but we don't really do so now, being written about in 1993 made my mind go to the difference between Kennedy, where everyone looked the other way, everybody knew, but everybody looked the other way constantly, versus Clinton, which was in the 90s, same time period, where I think the same feeling was being had of like, is this going to explode everything? And I remember I just watched a little documentary about the Clinton affair, is what the documentary is actually called. It's on Amazon or Netflix right now. One of the commenters at the time, like in a real-time interview at that time with Clinton, was saying, do you think people actually care about this? Like, is this actually what the people want to know? And the other person was saying, yes, of course the people care about this. And I was a Republican, you might imagine, But point being, with politics, there was a level of, do people really care about this? But with the royal family, you have the added layer of the Queen and then the future king in line to become the head of the Church of England. So it adds a different flair when you have the religious element of the monarchy. Charles himself feared the answer to that question. If you could die of embarrassment, he had. He was deeply aware that he had brought the monarchy into disrepute. Get this, y'all. His popularity numbers were in the tank at 4%. Only 4% of people approved of him. That is crazy. When he attempted a low-key royal appearance at a hostel center for the mentally ill, he was heckled. "Have you no shame?" someone asked him directly. Prince Philip ruminated that Charles was not king material. Oof. The British public agreed. 42% of the Queen's subjects now thought Charles should never become king. This was of real concern to his parents. 5 European kings and queens who attended Lord Mountbatten's funeral 15 years before were now all in exile. So monarchies across Europe were kind of falling and folding to republics, to democracies of some sort, and they were definitely fearing the potential loss of the monarchy altogether. Even though Diana had herself just been humiliatingly exposed in another salaciously leaked phone call with her admirer, James Gilby, whose term of endearment for her was squidgy. So again, let's not see Diana as a pure saint in every capacity without any soiling of her own. She remained the royal family's most popular member. The press unkindly noted that at a memorial service for the Earl of Westmoreland in November 1993, Diana looked radiantly beautiful, while Camilla looked old enough to be her mother. 9 months after the Camilla Gate tape was released, historian and celebrated diarist James Lees Milne reported in his entry in 1993 that Camilla is not beautiful and has lost her gaiety and sparkle. Women spit at her in supermarkets. Cameramen snoop at her at the fair. Walks with bowed head. Has trained her fluffy hair to cover her cheeks. That was his assessment, that she used her voluminous 70s hair to cover up her face, and she had lost her glow. She had lost her sparkle. There were rumors now that Prince Charles was looking at a property in Tuscany. This was an ominous sign, given its reputation as the paradise of exiles. The Queen Mother was so dismayed by this drift that she invited the prince to lunch at Clarence House. And without mentioning Tuscany, she prodded him to remember his visit to the sad, exiled Duke of Windsor at his house in Paris at the end of his life. It was her subtle way of reminding him what happens when you abandon duty and the futility of Edward VIII's life after abdication. I just want to pause here and say that this kind of long memory serves all of us when older family members gift us not a nagging, controlling voice that dominates every moment or tells you everything you have to do, but this particular moment where she was literally encouraging him. She was giving strength to him of, this is your duty. Remember what it's like when you've seen royals who have abandoned their duty. Don't let this moment block out your vision of what it's like when someone abdicates. And she was giving him a real gift in this moment, a gift of perspective that comes with years and decades of, hey, this decision that right now seems so critical and seems like the only choice you can make is this one. Instead, you need to train your eyes on the horizon. Pay attention to the actual reality of what is possible. And don't get limited into this place where you're bowed down in eternal shame over even something awful. I mean, the truth is we live in a society that is kind of obsessed with cancel culture. If you make one mistake, then you can have your life ruined. There's stories of people who send off a tweet and they're in South Africa, and by the time they get to New York, their whole career is obliterated. You know, they're totally shamed over something that's perceived as racist, or they retweeted something and didn't understand the context, or whatever. We are so willing to judge and condemn and dox and ruin the life of somebody over a one moment thing. And I think older people, I think back, there was this time in our lives where my husband had made a big mistake. It was an honest mistake, but it was a big mistake that ended up leading to his employment ending at this place. And one of the greatest gifts was the very next week we received 3 letters in the mail from older members of our church who were aware of the situation. And every one of them highlighted mistakes that they had made in their past, and that they didn't judge, that they knew that we, were trying to do our best, that we were honorable people, that they loved. They were just expressing their love and affection and continued desire for, respect and relationship between us, even though this mistake that was known in the community had been made. And one of them in particular went into extreme detail about the shame and the humiliation they felt, and just really cared for us in that moment. And I feel like this is similar, that there is this wise person helping him reckon with what is, even if it's a big mistake, even if it's a series, like in his case, of just clearly numbskulled, not just a decision, but like a way of life that he has chosen and thrown himself headlong into, and it could take down the monarchy, which she dearly had been devoted to with her entire life as the Queen Mother. But she's encouraging him to live in the truth and re-engage and remember the repercussions of what could be if you misstep here. And that is such a gift to him. I said something recently when I was talking about my husband's uncle, but I just think all of us have choices to make of who we're going to be. And I would much rather be this sort of person who speaks into the people in my life with whom I have influence, helps them lift their head out of their circumstances and see a long-term vision for what can be, without judgmentalism, without pouring it on them when they're already under fire, but offering them the benefit of the years that I've been given on the earth. I would much rather do that than be either, silent and just sit back and observe and let my loved one fall. But also, the other thing is, I don't want to be somebody who just sits in judgment as if I've never made a step wrong, as if I've never done anything that's humiliating, as if I've never done anything that I wouldn't want splashed across the papers, as if I wouldn't want anything. I mean, I don't know about y'all. I feel very grateful that social media did not document all my stupidity, that everything I ever did was not cataloged with, dozens of pictures posted far and wide. Like, I feel very grateful for the time in life that I came of age. So I don't know a person that would want all of their worst choices to be picked apart like this. No matter how much we want to sit in judgment of this, and I think there's a right level of that, of like, it was wrong from start to finish. Everything, the way that it continued on with them after anyone has said any vows, it's all wrong. But this is what is, and the Queen Mother is entering into what is, and I admire that. I think it's brave to be willing to walk into the imperfection of human situations and be willing to roll up your sleeves and be with the person who's in it, rather than stand off at a distance and act like we've never had a human situation ourselves. There was another debacle ahead, a disastrous appearance by the Prince of Wales on June 29th, 1994, in a TV documentary by his friend Jonathan Dimbleby, in which he confirmed his adultery. The title of it was Charles, the Private Man, the Public Role. And Dimbleby was about to roll out a biography of the prince. So that was the purpose of it. The timing, though, was clearly a mistake. This 620-page book that he had written, that was well researched and has actually been very praised and received high regard for what a good job he did writing about the prince, it still was subsumed by the drama and the stress of the moment. And there's a particular soundbite that came out from that. Charles had cooperated with Dimbleby to a reckless degree. He had offered up 10,000 personal letters and diaries and long introspective interviews. That is so much food for a biographer. The Queen and Prince Philip were appalled at his naivety in doing so. They were offended by the content also. The Queen reportedly sighed, pursed her lips, and murmured, "So it's come to this." His parents had no time for sob stories about all the brutalities at Gordonston. One story he had told was that the boys in his dorm beat him over the head with pillows all night because he snored. His younger brothers, after all, seemed to have attended the school without undue emotional scars. So the Queen resented this portrayal. She thought that the portrait of her as a remote, unfeeling parent was unkind, and Philip did not appreciate being depicted as an insensitive tyrant. He remembered Charles's childhood quite differently. He remembered jolly Balmoral picnics, reading him the Song of Hiawatha before he went to sleep, and summer holidays cruising on a 12-meter yacht, the Bloodhound, with Sister Anne. For Camilla, though, the worst harm was the defining soundbite 3/4 into the discussion. Dimbleby asked whether Charles, after he married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981, had tried to be faithful and honorable to his wife. "Yes, absolutely," replied the prince, adding this caveat, "until it became irretrievably broken down, us both having tried." Bingo. Adultery. For the tabloid, there was a feast of headlines, and I didn't even know that Piers was old enough to do this, but Piers Morgan's News of the World rushed out a late edition that blasted the news, "Charles, I've never loved Diana." I didn't realize that Piers would have been old enough to be reporting globally at this point in his career. James Lees Milne was one of the country's squirearchy who watched the interview in incredulity. The universal condemnation of Charles's admission was a precursor of the opprobrium that would descend on Prince Andrew after his disastrous sit-down in 2019. You remember that, to try to clear his name, and he made all these ridiculous assertions like, "I have this medical condition where I don't sweat. It's very weird, but I couldn't have been all sweaty at the club dancing with her because I don't sweat." He literally expected people to believe that he does not sweat. Anyway, Lees Milne wrote, "I only saw a few minutes of Prince Charles's interview, but it was enough to make me deplore the whole exercise. This idealistic, middle-aged man, struggling to get the words out, writhing with intellectual deficiency. A great mistake for him to admit marital infidelity. He should have refused to discuss such matters, whatever the pressure." And the Queen would agree with that, right? She has that never complain, never explain mentality. And it sounds like Camilla did too, but Charles did not. He, at least at this point in his life, tried. He was trying to gain back the people. And I mean, on one level, you kind of can't blame him that with 4%, you might figure, what can I lose? Only 4% of the people are even for me and with me, so I might as well try. But it was not well advised. The Queen's former press secretary, Dickie Arbiter, concurred. The program was a complete whinge, a terrible own goal that not just affected relations between the prince and princess, but between St. James's Palace, that was where Charles's office was headquartered, and Buckingham Palace. It was just a double whammy when Diana goes out in her black, what would be called her revenge dress, later that night to a Vanity Fair party. As Camilla fought off more ugly press from Charles's confirmation of their adultery, she was also in deep distress over the health of her own mother, Rosalind. Like Sonia Cubitt before her, Mrs. Shand was dwindling away with severe osteoporosis. She shrank 8 inches and became so bent over she could no longer properly digest her food. Y'all, that would be so hard to watch your mother go through, especially in a moment like this where you really would want her protection and care and nurture. In a way, I can imagine perhaps that this could have given Camilla something different to focus on, but it would all feel so heavy. I just can't even imagine. Camilla described her mother this way. Occasionally when she moved or you touched her, she literally screamed. I remember when a friend of hers came in one day just to give her a hug and her rib broke. She died in July 1994 at the age of 72. The pain of her mother's death was now compounded by her husband's, Andrew's, desire for a divorce. So here we have like so many blows in a row. You do start to feel this. I hope that even if you came into this episode hating Camilla, there has to be some level of human empathy where we say, you know, set aside the adultery, but if we just describe the other events, the public shaming on multiple instances, then your mother, and then now your husband is divorcing you when he was fine with the adultery all along, and in fact had a gazillion dalliances of his own, but now he's dropping you. Many of the Parker Bowles' friends believe that if not for Dimbleby, Andrew and Camilla might never have ended their marriage. Interesting. Charles's admission of infidelity on camera was what was said to be the last straw for Andrew. One might ask why it took this long for Mr. Man-in-Waiting to finally draw a line in the sand. Wasn't Morton's book enough? The Tampax situation? It seems that in upper-class adultery code, the only truly dishonorable thing to do is to tell the truth. Which, the idea of truth is something that's central to Christian faith. To confess our sin literally means to tell the truth about our sin, that we are agreeing with God that what we did was wrong. And I was just thinking that in this religion of British aristocracy, they have their own code. They have a religious code. And according to this code, naming it is the sin. It's the exact opposite of confession. In confession, you clear your heart. You are free from sin by telling the truth about it. You say, you know, I yelled at my child. God, I agree with you that I was sinfully angry. And then we go to our actual child or anyone who heard it and say, like, what I did was wrong. Please forgive me. I shouldn't behave that way. Like, I want to do better in the future. I'm asking for God's help to do better in the future. That sort of thing. So we tell the truth about whatever happened back here. Whatever it was, we look at it in clear-eyed, and we tell the truth about it to God and to people. Okay, that's confession. That is what that means. In this instance, the only thing you can't do is tell the truth about it. You can do it, you can hint at it, everyone can know about it. The whole thing can be totally enveloped in the sin. The only thing you can't do is tell the truth about it. It is a complete reversal of confession. And it's also, I just wanted to note, it's the opposite of what gives freedom. One of the things that is the answer to the cancel culture that I was talking about earlier is this idea that when we grow and we tell the truth about something that happened back here, under a confession model, we realize what has happened. We tell the truth about what's happened, and that actually lets everyone around us know, hey, she realizes she was totally out of control in anger, and we can now forgive because she sees it the way we do, that it was out of bounds, out of control, shouldn't have happened. She was angry. So then everyone can exist in this truth that is reality, and forgiveness can happen. And we can all say, yes, we're going to move forward together. You told the truth about it. We're going to go forward together. This actually shackles to not tell the truth about things, to be always in a system where the only thing you don't do is tell the truth about it, means there is no freedom. You're in it. You're shackled to the sin and can never tell the truth about it. And I don't know. I think this religious system, which is a religious code, Let's be honest about it. There's a set of beliefs that is like, we can all do these things and it's without penalty, and you can cheat on me, I'll cheat on you. As long as none of us actually like publicly publish it in the paper and there's no printed shame involved, everyone else can know about it. I mean, the whole world can know about it. But as long as we don't print it or put it in written form, then we're good. We can stay married. It's all so weird to me. And I just wanted to point out, though, that it is a complete reversal of the idea that telling the truth and letting things be seen in the light is what gives freedom. This is the opposite belief system of that. By December, proceedings were issued. With warp speed, the divorce was heard in January 1995 and finalized by March. Diana retaliated against Dimbleby. She had a November 1995 interview with Martin Bashir on Panorama. This directed an even sharper laser on the reasons that her marriage to Charles had collapsed. Their children, Laura and Tom, were not handling the successive parental embarrassments well. Laura blamed Charles for the breakup of her parents' marriage, and she feuded about it with Prince William. William would blame Camilla for all the hurt she had caused his mother, which would then send Laura into a rage, and Laura wasn't having any of it. She would take a hard line and fire back at William. "Your father has ruined my life." In April 1995, Camilla's son Tom, still at Oxford, was arrested for possession of drugs after being searched leaving a South London nightclub. He said, "I didn't help myself by getting into all sorts of trouble. It was nothing serious. I was just mucking around, dabbling in stuff and not being clever." That was what he said in retrospect 20 years later. He managed not to be sent down from Oxford at that time, but he was strongly cautioned by the police. And in February 1996, Andrew then marries his marriage. So he's totally fine. He's good. This was the very rich and vivacious Rosemary Pittman, and he did so at the registry office with their children present. She notes, perhaps he just wanted some peace and to draw a line under the whole undignified marital mess with Camilla that had played out for so many years in the press. The ex-Mrs. Parker Bowles was left fragile and exposed. I guess enough was enough for Andrew. For the first time, Camilla felt she was losing the upper hand. If the prince discarded her now, her social standing and long-term security would be seriously reduced. She was already keenly worried about money. In the divorce settlement, Middlewick House was swiftly offloaded. The couple split the proceeds, and Camilla's share went towards a new house, Ray Mill House. It was a mid-19th century stone pile on 17 acres, secluded at the end of a long drive, so it gave her privacy. She furnished it with cozy charm, and she displayed a grand portrait of Alice Keppel that dominated the living room. Interesting. It's like she's embracing this whole model of, well, this is what path I'm choosing. The privacy of the location was perfect, but the outlay left her cash poor. One of her plans had been to bring her widowed father to live in a converted barn on the property to keep as company for them both, but she was denied planning permissions, and so he had to go live with her sister Annabelle. Her only visible asset was some family land in Lincolnshire, divided with her siblings. Her share gave her an income of $15,000 a year. She had sustained some financial losses. It goes into detail. I'm not going to get into that, but she lost money that her grandmother had left to her. And so the home itself was put into a trust so that she wouldn't be at risk of losing her home because she was losing so much money and she was very cash poor. So she put the ownership of the house into a trust. Some of Camilla's shortage of cash may have actually been strategic. So this is interesting. The thinking here would have been that the prince's blabbing to Dimbleby is what had triggered Andrew's divorce proceedings. So now Mrs. Parker Bowles needed a big house to live in if she was going to entertain the Prince of Wales. He had a duty to provide for her. Thus, Camilla began to accumulate perks from the prince to improve her post-divorce life. At first, it was things like this. When she hosted a dinner party, the Highgrove chef would be dispatched out to cook. The Highgrove butler would shop and charge it to the prince's account. She also was able to stable her horse Molly at Highgrove, and that reduced her hunting costs. A consignment of flowers, bushes, and trees from the prince's estate was sent over in a horse trailer to beautify her property. So he's sort of taking care of her amidst all of this stress. When her road flooded, he gifted her a Range Rover. He also had a dress allowance that she was given. So this all might sound like kind of small potatoes. I mean, to me, it doesn't sound like small potatoes. It sounds like quite a number of things, you know, to dress up her property, to actually physically dress her, to pay for parties and gatherings that she would host. But Camilla then also was exerting increasing control over Charles's diary. She would join the diary meetings at St. James's Palace, and members of his team were amused and began describing Camilla as the woman who waited. So they're seeing her just quietly keep her place and wait a bit. She had quite a serious car accident where she seemed to be at fault and to show bad judgment. The prince then arranged for a round-the-clock man and wife chauffeur team to be housed near her property. So he just decided, we're not going to have you driving around stressing about paparazzi or whoever. We're going to go ahead and give you a chauffeur. To maintain more momentum, a more overt show of the prince's commitment was needed. Camilla's 50th birthday party was the right occasion. The Prince of Wales told his closest aide to pull out the stops with a festive 5-course banquet for Mrs. Parker Bowles at Highgrove. It would be followed then in September. So this is July 1997. That should be setting off alarm bells for all of us, because August is sadly when Princess Diana's life came to an end. So July 97 was going to be this big party. And then September, there was a plan that she would step out in some philanthropic roles, that she would start to be rolled out as a woman with respectability in the community who was serving in some capacities. The timing was not inauspicious. His ex-wife's halo was slipping. Diana had begun attracting all the wrong kind of press by cavorting in the south of France on Mohammed Al Fayed's boat. So he thinks, she's making a display of herself. We're going to go ahead and quietly step forward, advance the ball a little bit on the plan of eventually having Camilla be accepted by the people, or at least remake her reputation in some way was his goal. This birthday night, there would be no sneaking into Highgrove by a side entrance. Corralled by Bolland, the press were allowed rear access. As the woman of the hour's chauffeur-driven car swept into Highgrove's front drive, the cameras caught her, smiling joyfully, in the back seat. She was wearing a whopping diamond and pearl necklace that was the prince's 50th birthday present to her. It was said, interestingly, to have once belonged to Alice Keppel. It was retrieved by Charles from a private collection. So it seems like they're both wholeheartedly embracing that whole thing of, my great-grandmother and your great-great-grandfather had a little thing, so how about it? Whether or not that's actually how she propositioned him in the beginning, they are both wholly embracing the heritage there and not hiding it at all. Interestingly, at this party, so the garden was beautiful, of course. I've heard nothing but high praise about Prince Charles's Highgrove Gardens. He has done an amazing amount of work to it. He takes fastidious care of it. And it was ablaze with harpists serenading the 80 guests, drinking champagne under Arabian Nights themed tents. But no other royals or Charles's sons attended, but all of the couple's grand friends and Camilla's relatives did. They danced the night away with intimacy and joy. That was in July. It all seemed like everything was on the upward swing. But 6 weeks later, the world was mad with grief. It was Bolland who first got through to Camilla in the early hours of the 31st of August, 1997, to tell her that Diana had died. Until that moment, she thought that the princess had merely been injured in the crash. Her first response was as a mother. "Those poor, poor boys," she replied in sorrow. Her next concern was for Charles. Would he fall apart? He must not, for the sake of the boys. She knew him well enough to understand how harshly he would blame himself for the tragedy. There would be no possibility now of joining him in those philanthropic ventures in September. Forget about the glittering Evening of Enchantment fundraiser. With Diana being canonized by the public, the other woman who had caused her so much pain, had now become radioactive again. Camilla went to ground, hiding out at her house in Wiltshire. Charles's office sent 2 policemen to sit outside in a car in case some nutter, unhinged by grief for Diana, tried to get in. Even for the mistress who knew better than anyone how to play the long game, the odds had horribly lengthened. As the world mourned Diana, Camilla had plenty of time to ponder the impact that the princess's death would have on her own future. Charles called her constantly, in a state of despair and panic. As usual, his mistress was a soothing balm for him. He was tormented by a toxic combination of sorrow, thwarted hope, and self-pity. Solitary grieving walks in the Balmoral heather could not assuage his sense of guilt. Buried tenderness from their early days together added to his pain. She was so young when I married her. What hope was there now for the successful completion of what Mark Bolland used to call Operation PB, or Operation Parker Bowles? The public thought it would have all been different but for his obsession with his horse-faced mistress, Camilla. He feared they would never forgive him now. Would he wind up like the Duke of Windsor, driven into exile because of his stubborn love for a woman? Cloistered at her Wiltshire home, Camilla watched the funeral of the princess along with 2.5 billion other viewers on television. It was unclear how long she would need to disappear while the press bayed for someone other than itself to blame. Right now, Camilla was public enemy number 1, the purest anathema. That could change. If she navigated with care, the demise of Diana might turn out to be something only uttered sotto voce by the Queen Mother, providential, for the future of the monarchy and for her. So the Queen Mother, who already has encouraged Charles to kind of look at the long game, she is still looking at the long game, and she sees this as, well, this could be providential. 8 months later, the Camilla campaign was back on track. In 1998, Charles mandated for Mrs. Parker Bowles an annual stipend that would be paid quarterly from his private funds. The Prince of Wales was soon recast as a sympathetic, single father adored by his 2 sons. By the end of 1998, so a little more than a year after her death, Charles had overtaken Tony Blair in the BBC Radio 4 poll as Man of the Year. So he went from, what a reversal to go from 4% to Man of the Year. That's amazing. Well, we have reached the end of our Camilla chapters, and the next one is Mother of the Nation, the Queen's 21st Century Headaches. So we're going to be getting into Queen Elizabeth, and I hope you'll join me for that. But please now, go ahead and like this video. If you haven't subscribed, I would love for you to do so now. I would welcome you to do so and join our conversation. And then please leave in the comments what you noticed about this. Where do you sit in terms of how you're judging Camilla? And could you identify with any parts of her? Are there parts of you that, however you feel morally, you find yourself sympathizing with her? Because I definitely did. I have abhorrence, utter abhorrence. My heart would be totally a wreck if there was any adultery in my marriage. I wouldn't be able to stand it. And so, yeah, I can totally, feel that judgment. And yet so many parts of this episode, like her mother, the situation where she's so frail, so brittle, just elicit my sympathy. And I wonder if you felt the same. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time as we get into Queen Elizabeth. Have a great day. Bye.